Hey, everybody. Look, it's us again. Welcome into the Sixth Floor Podcast, a podcast where we draft the 80s. I'm Yap. There in the upper left is Breeze. Lower left is Johnson. Lower right is Sags. Glare off the top of your head as you bend over and look at your picks for today. There you go. We are drafting the 80s, and it is Johnson's topic. Would you care to explain today?
Sure. I thought we would try something different and go with Saturday Night Live skits from the 80s. I think I mentioned last week, Rolling Stone came out with a list where they ranked every cast member in the history of the show, and that just kind of got my wheels turning a little bit and just started thinking about some of the different skits that I've seen through the years that I really like. And since we're kind of staying in the 80s right now, I thought we would just limit it to 80s skits.
Awesome. Good deal. So have you randomized the draft order?
I have.
Okay.
We're going Sags 1, me 2, Yap 3, Breeze 4.
Okay. So,
Nice.
all right. Good deal. Sags, you're on the clock.
You are.
I'm ready, actually. So I almost feel like this would have been the perfect topic from like 85 to 95, right? Because in like the early 80s, I think, well, I know me personally, I was like just a shade too young, right? 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. But then like later in and then into the mid 90s, you kind of that's when you start remembering stuff a lot. But I don't know if I've ever laughed this hard. And I just went with like individual skits. I didn't go with characters. But this was actually, this was your brother and my probably favorite skit. We watched this. If we watched this 100 times, I wouldn't be surprised. It's a game show, which Saturday Night Live always does really well. A game show skit. I think this one is better than any Jeopardy skit that was done, with Will Ferrell and all them. But it was the Jackie Rogers Jr. $100,000 jackpot wad, specifically with Billy Crystal as Sammy Davis Jr. And I think it was Jim Belushi as Bob Keesham or Captain Kangaroo. Is that right?
Yep. Jim Belushi. Yep.
It was freaking hilarious. And to show you that this could never play today, Billy Crystal is in full black makeup. Full on. Like, he looks like Sammy Davis Jr. And obviously that would not fly today. But, again, this was a mid to early 80s. So, Captain Kangaroo getting so upset that his person couldn't get the clues, and he made sure that Jackie was giving him the money in cash and not a check, because that's what they agreed to. And, man, the whole thing is just hilarious. Sammy Davis Jr. giving clues and the guy guessing it before he even gives a clue. Like he says, this is, and the guy says, chocolate babies? And that's it. That's the one. And then the thing I probably laughed the hardest at is Billy Crystal's describing it, and he says, okay, this is a long, and the word is asparagus. And he says, this is a long shaft with a tip at the end. And the guy guessing goes, and he says, pass. It's just solid. So my first pick, glad I got to go first because I was afraid somebody would take it. Jackie Rogers Jr., $100,000 jackpot wad. Awesome.
That's such a great pick. I totally forgot about that. That's not even on my list. But as soon as you said game show, oh, man, I know.
Brian and I watched that. We rewound that thing. I'm telling you, we had to watch it 100 times. We were in tears watching that. It was hilarious.
And Martin Short, I mean, my goodness. When he comes out and he's cross-eyed, he's got his tongue out. That is such a funny skit, man. That's great.
And at the end, they put the guy on the wheel and they spin him, spinning, and then it comes up, spin again. Good stuff, man. That's my pick.
Yeah, good one. Good
Great stuff.
Great one. I was checking out like some different like lists of like best '80s SNL skits, and that one was in the top 3 in like every single list I saw. So
Great.
Speaking of Martin Short, he's a big part of my first pick, and this is not a recurring skit, but this is really the first Saturday Night Live skit that I can remember just laughing uncontrollably at. Probably kick-started my interest in the show as a whole. And I'm talking about a skit that debuted, I actually wrote the date down here, October 6th, 1984. I'm talking about men's synchronized swimming. When Martin Short looks up at the camera and says, I'm not that good a swimmer. I mean, we dig a hole. So many quotable lines in that skit. And Sags mentioned, like, you and Yap's brother rewatching that skit over and over. I remember one time our first year on Holderby, I was taking Hayner home, and the car I had at the time didn't really have a great radio in it. So we didn't have any music to listen to. So we just recited lines from that skit for like 3 hours and just laughed all the way from Huntington to Barber County. And when I think of that skit, I think of Martin Short, but I also think of Hayner sitting in my car going, I know you. Hey, I'm not mad at you.
I know you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that had to be my number 1 pick.
That's awesome.
Love it.
Yeah.
So
I got to look that one up when we're done. I remember it obviously very vividly, but I got to rewatch that one.
That is so funny. And the music they use at the end, Frank Stallone, Far From Over.
Yeah.
Da-da, da-da, da-da. And you laugh so hard at that.
Oh,
that is
man.
so good. So good.
I probably didn't realize it at the time, but the other main 2 guys in that skit with Martin Short are Christopher Guest and Harry Shearer, who are 2 of the 3 guys in Spinal Tap, and which would go on to become one of my favorite comedies. And so just good stuff by all those guys in that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Man.
This seems to be a trend, but my first pick also involves Martin Short, oddly enough. And pretty much, I mean, there are some guys that, they did their thing and they were so versatile. They could do so much, like the synchronized swimming bit and the Jackie Rogers Jr. And another character that he did that was just, I don't know why, it made me laugh so hard whenever he came on with this. And it was a recurring character. And it was the guy who pulled his pants up too high. He had the hair sticking straight up. It was Ed Grimley.
Ed Grimley.
And Ed Grimley, anytime he was on, and he had the Pat Sajak, and he was going to meet Pat Sajak, and I'm totally mental, I must say. One of those deals. And I mean, it wasn't just a one-time thing, but it was so many times he was on, and every time it was totally classic. The way he danced, and they turned that into a cartoon, believe it or not. The totally mental misadventures of Ed Grimley, which was hilarious. But every time that skit come on, that was another one that I watched over and over again, because I just loved that character, Ed Grimley, because he was just so weird and different in the way he looked. It was just, I loved Ed Grimley, and that's going to be my first pick.
Great pick.
Oh, love it.
The cool thing about that too, Jason, I don't know if you saw that when you were kind of looking around about that. He debuted that character on SCTV when he was on that show, and then he brought it over to SNL when he joined SNL.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a little interesting.
Bree's up for 2.
All right. So my thinking was on this is that I kind of wanted to stay closer to some of the recurring characters that you saw over and over again over the course of maybe a few years. And during the mid 80s, well, before I get to that, I wanted to say, because we mentioned all three of you guys picked Martin Short. What's interesting about the mid 80s SNL years to me is that like those early 80s years, they were still kind of riding on the coattails of the beginning of the show with Chevy and Dan and all the Belushi and all the original cast members. And then in the late 80s, you had the emergence of Will Ferrell and Adam Sandler and all that group that really brought the show to another level. And then that mid 80s era, there was a lot of talk that the show should be canceled. Lorne Michaels stepped away during that period of time for a year or so. And there's just a lot of turmoil and people thought the show shouldn't be on anymore. But when you look at the cast during those years, like Johnson said, you know, you had Harry Shearer, Christopher Guest, Martin Short, Al Franken was in there, and those. I mean, you go down through the list of the people that were on that show, and even some of the writers, Julia Louis-Dreyfus. I mean, just go Billy Crystal, just go on and on and on, and it's just amazing cast members in that mid '80s period when the show allegedly stunk.
Yeah.
So I just
Larry David was a writer during that era. I mean.
So it's just kind of funny that you had all that amazing talent in that period of time, and they were saying that's the worst years of the show, which is odd to me. So one of my favorite characters during this period of time was John Lovitz. I don't know what it is about him, but every skit that he was in, no matter what he did, it was always made me laugh. And the big character that sticks out for me that he did was Master Thespian, and so that's going to be my first pick. That was a recurring character. The two that I'll mention here real quick. The one is where he played Santa Claus in one of them, and he comes in. Phil Hartman is like the manager of the store who hires him to be Santa Claus, and he's talking to him, and Master Thespian says, "I can play any character that you want me to, and I can even do it with half a finger." And Phil Hartman goes, "Oh, wow, what happened?" He said, "Nothing. Acting." So, you know, he had that catchphrase, you know, he would say, "Acting?
I'm acting."
And then they would say, "Genius." And he would say, "Thank you." So he gets out. So they're back in the dressing room, and they come out, and he gets in the chair, and he goes, "Ho, ho, ho, I'm Santa Claus, blah, blah, blah." So the first little girl comes up, sits on his knee, and she says, "Santa, I would like a doll for Christmas." And he turns around, looks, and he goes, "Line." So Phil Hartman leaves. He's like, "No, you're Santa Claus. You got to tell them, you know, that you're going to get them whatever they want." And so it's hilarious.
I just watched that last night. Odd that you bring that up, because I was going through Peacock, and they've got all these great skits from the 80s, and I did watch that. It just Master Thespian is one of my favorites, because even at church we'd walk around going, "I'm acting. Thank you. No, thank you. Line." That's good.
Yeah.
Man, that's
the other good skit he had was with Phil Hartman again, but then Robin Williams was the guest host that week, and Robin Williams was playing a director, and so Phil Hartman had this like 2 or 3 lines that he had to say, and he nailed his lines every time. And Master Thespian comes out, and all he had to do was say 2 lines, and he just screwed it up every single time. And so they're like into take 20, and Robin Williams is like losing his mind. He's like, "Just say the words."
That's so good.
Okay, so that was my first pick. With the second pick, oh boy. I'm gonna stick with Billy Crystal, and Christopher Guest had a recurring character they did called Willie and Frankie. I don't know if any of you guys.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's on my list.
Took it, man.
So you know, based on your guys' reactions there, I think you all like that one too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about, man, it's just amazing that these shows were panned when these guys were on here. I mean, watching these guys now, it's just, oh my gosh, it's hilarious. I don't know what people thought that they thought that wasn't funny. But those two guys would just sit and talk with each other, and they'd finish each other's sentences. And it just got so disgusting what they would do, or they were like, yeah, boy, you know, the other day I was sitting around the house and I decided to take one of those.
Ball peen hammers?
Yeah, one of those ball peen hammers, and I would just stick it in my ear and just really jam it in there. And then all of a sudden.
You pulled it out and your brains came
Good
out?
stuff, man.
Yeah.
And then, boy, I hate when that happens.
Yeah. That was
So
funny.
that's going to be my second pick, William Frankie.
That was on my list.
Add it.
My second pick, I could go a couple of different ways, and I think we all could probably go a couple of different ways with our picks. But I'm going to go with a character that was in the early to mid 80s, and it was a recurring character as well. And it was Eddie Murphy, who had his little spin on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and it was Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood. And he came in and he was singing the song and talked about, you know, hope nobody's home and I'll break in, you know, when he's singing the song. He would put on his shoes, somebody would knock at the door, and he would do that face and go, who is at the door, boys and girls? Let's go see. And then get to the door and say, who is it? And it was usually the cops, and you know, he wanted to run. He'd have a word that he put on the board, and just a character that was over and over. Then he'd go to the escape, the fire escape, and run away from the cops. And the one episode that I remember I was watching last night, he had a box, and he said, "Let's see what we have in this box, boys and girls. Ooh, look at this! It is a brand new car stereo." And it's a Blaupunk. This is very expensive, boys and girls. And you'd be surprised that it only took Mr. Robinson 29 seconds to bust the window out of the BMW to get this. Mr. Rogers, the most wholesome guy that you could see on a TV show. And just to totally spin that with Mr. Robinson, I got to go with that number 2.
That's solid. We could almost pull off doing just an Eddie Murphy SNL skit.
Yeah.
After. I mean, he has so many good ones, and I wouldn't be surprised if his name pops up again before the night is over. My second pick is a recurring character, but it's not a recurring character from a cast member. This guy happened to be a host several times in the 80s, Tom Hanks. And he has a character called Mr. Short-Term Memory. And every time I see one of those skits, I have tears in my eyes. I watched a couple this afternoon, the one where he's in the hospital. I believe his friend Steve, played by Phil Hartman, just broke his leg. And Tom Hanks' commitment to that character, and without ever really breaking character, is just hilarious. He's like, "Oh my God, what happened?" And Phil Hartman explains, "Well, I was getting some lights down off the roof and I fell and broke my leg." And, "Oh my God, you broke your leg? We better get you to a hospital." we are in a hospital. He's like, "What are we doing in the hospital?" It just goes over and over. And then one of my all-time favorite Mr. Short-Term Memory lines, he's on a blind date. And his date comes back from the bathroom, and he's like, "Who are you?" And he's "I'm your date." And he's like, "All right." And he looks down and sees his wallet, and he's like, "Someone left their wallet here. Whose wallet is this?" She's like, "That's your wallet." And he's like, "It is now." And it just cracks me up every single time I see it. Like you said, not a cast member, but Tom Hanks was a big part of Saturday Night Live in the 80s, and I love that character.
I think in that same one when he's on the date, I think that's the one where he looks at her, he goes, "Who are you?" She said, "I'm your date." And he goes, "All right."
Yeah.
He didn't, he forgot it was a date. Very funny. The good news is I have 2 picks, but I have 3 left on my list. So, and I'm going to save one because I think Yap might take it. So I'm going to leave that to him. So my second pick is going to be a skit involving Mr. Eddie Murphy. And again, probably a skit I don't know if you could pull off today, but very funny. It was Eddie Murphy talking about race. And he wanted to really decide, he wanted to see if it was different to be a white guy.
Oh, yeah.
So he went in full white makeup as a white guy. And it's very subtly funny. It's not like tears in your eyes funny. It's not double over funny. But just seeing him, first of all, as a white person is very funny. And he comes out and he goes in to buy a newspaper very first thing. And there's nobody in the little convenience store. And he puts the paper down and he puts the money down. And the cashier's like, "What are you doing?"
Mm-hmm.
"There's nobody around. Go ahead. You can take it."
Mm-hmm.
And Eddie Murphy is super confused. And he goes, "I suddenly began to realize that white people give other white people things for free." Again, not just a very funny skit. So that will be my second pick. It's called White Like Me.
Wasn't his name Mr. White?
Yes, it was. He went to the bank to get a loan, and the black bank worker was not going to give him the loan because he had no job, no money, no identification, no nothing. And then the white bank worker comes and just says, "Here, take this money. Pay us back when you can. In fact, don't pay us back at all. We don't care." And then there's a line that I'm not going to say on here. It's not super bad, but that Eddie Murphy says that's very funny in that scene. So I would suggest everybody look it up. It's very funny. So White Like Me will be my second pick. And then rounding it out, Eddie Murphy as Buckwheat. But specifically, there was 2 Buckwheats you could go with, and I won't mention the one that I'm not going to choose because somebody might pick it. But the one I'm going with is back in the 80s, there were, late at night especially, there were commercials for records that you could buy, usually from K-Tel.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of the thing. And so they did Eddie Murphy as Buckwheat and all these songs. And instead of like looking for love, it was Wookin' Panub. And just, again, great stuff. Eddie Murphy singing as Buckwheat is hilarious. And it's like Buckwheat's greatest hits or whatever. So that will be my third pick. So I feel I have a pretty strong crew there.
"Fee Times a Matey" was one of the songs too.
Yep.
That was the first one on there.
Once, twice, "Fee Times a Matey." Okay.
When he says 3 times, he holds up 5 fingers, though.
All right. For my next pick, I'm going with a skit. Tom Hanks used to host a lot, and he had this character named Mr. Short-Term Memory. So I'm going to go with that with my third pick.
Well played,
look at that. Sir. Way to go, man.
Well played. Boy, he had that in the holster all week.
Yeah, he did.
If you didn't take Buckwheat singing, that's what I was going to go with. And I was actually thinking, as you were saying that, I was like, man, there used to be so many late night commercials about, K-Tel records. And that skit may have been better than any of the commercials. So
I think you're right.
I'm going to go, I'm looking at a couple of like big ones that were recurring skits that I had on the board. I won't mention them all just in case someone else wants to take one, and might bring up the others that are in honorable mentions. But man, this one became really kind of iconic. Wayne's World, and that kind of launched. That was one of the if I'm not mistaken, maybe the first movie franchise that spun off of a Saturday Night Live skit that was ultra successful. Because Wayne's World did mad box office money, which cannot be said about every other skit that went on to become a movie franchise. I just Dana Carvey is right with me, is right there with Martin Short as like one of my favorite guys, and then Mike Myers, of course. Just and sometimes I wonder about things. It's like, if there's no Wayne's World, I mean, are they the precursor to the Beavis and Buttheads of the world, and and stuff like that? I mean, they're kind of the first, two guys just sitting around talking about chicks and music, and I don't know. I like to think that Mike Judge was heavily influenced by that skit.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
I just watched the Aerosmith one with Tom Hanks a little earlier.
Yeah.
He was the roadie.
And no particular skit really stands out. It's just, I mean, every week they were on, I mean, it was consistently funny.
Yeah.
You get down to the last pick, and you still have like 9 that you really want to take, and that makes it so hard.
And if I'm not mistaken, you were the one worried about there being enough
Mm-hmm.
from the 80s to choose from.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember that.
No.
Hey,
No,
I've
it
got a
was you.
phone. Is this my phone? Wow. Oh gosh. I mean, we could, and I'll mention these in the honorable mention, but the one I think I'm going to end with is a bit that I think aired only one time, if I'm mistaken, but it was another Eddie Murphy, and we still quote this to this day, around here. I don't know if you guys do or not, but it was. We got 10 minutes left, by the way. It was James Brown Celebrity Hot Tub. And he comes out and he's got his band on either side, and they're playing the horns and the sax, and he just comes out and just starts singing, "Hot tub, gonna make you sweat, gonna get in the hot tub." He goes, then he pauses, "Well, get in the hot tub," and they go, "Yeah, will it make me sweat? Yeah. Get in the hot tub, yeah. Will it make me wet? Well. And then he puts his foot in the water and he goes, "Ow, too hot in the hot tub." And, he disrobes and he's out there in his underwear, and then they cover him up, and, he gets in the water, and then it cuts away and it says, "Join us next time on Celebrity Hot Tub," when he's joined by Dr. Joyce Brothers. And then there's James Brown and Joyce Brothers in the hot tub together. It's just so funny. And, whenever I hear the word hot tub, that's the first thing that I think of. Hey, we got a hot tub at this cabin. Hot tub, you're gonna make it sweat. That's gonna be my last pick today.
I just watched that skit about 3 hours ago.
That's so funny.
It was just as funny as the first time I watched it.
Yep. All right, Mr. Irrelevant.
All right. I was going to go one direction, but I'm going to save that for our extended honorable mention list, because something Justin just said a second ago made me think. Like, when I was looking at some of these skits and some of these recurring characters and stuff, I thought these were solid 80s skits and 80s characters, but some of them were actually like kind of late 80s. So it kind of surprised me that these are available to pick. I'll mention some of those here in a second. But with my last pick, I'm going to go with Billy Crystal again, and I'm going to do Fernando's Hideaway, which was a recurring skit, and it had a big catchphrase that was popular for several years. I don't know if people still say it today. Maybe they do in the right circumstance. It's "You look marvelous" was the catchphrase. And
I'm pretty sure I used it at least once this week. So.
You remember the time that Hulk Hogan and Mr. T were on that Fernando's Hideaway?
Just watched it.
And Billy Crystal breaks character. He says, "When you laugh, your little things, they go bouncy, bouncy, bouncy." And Mr. T and Hogan lost it. And they wouldn't stop laughing. And here they are, big time wrestlers and bodyguard, and they just couldn't stop laughing. That was so funny, and that's good.
Philly, I can't believe you didn't pick. I was the one I had on my list. Grumpy Old Man.
Oh yeah, I forgot about him. I wasn't. He wasn't on my list, but that's the way it was.
You quoted that for. You quoted that for years.
Back in my day. Yeah. Now there were a bunch that I had that could easily have been in this draft. I had Toonces, the driving cat.
Yeah.
Love Toonces.
Love Toonces. You mentioned Buckwheat. There was one that was called Buckwheat Buys the Farm, where Buckwheat got shot. Yeah. And one
they cut into every skit that night.
Yep. Yeah. And they cut to different things around the world and people saying stuff about Buckwheat. I'll just give you one more. I know there's a lot more that you guys probably have too. There was a bit they did about gag products, and it was a 60 Minutes take, and Martin Short was like the guy where he said,
Mike Wallace.
Mike Wallace.
Or no.
He didn't play Mike Wallace, but he was the guy that was being interviewed.
Right.
He was smoking. And he said, I didn't say that. Did you say that? You said that. I didn't say that. And he looks at the camera. He's like, it's him.
Sweating.
Right? Yeah. It's not me. It's him, right? It's him. Just about gag. And that just cracked me up because Mike Wallace would hold something up and he says, this is a document. And Martin Short goes, I know that. No, let me finish. This is a document implicating you. Oh, man, that was one of my favorites. I love that one. So what about you guys? You guys have some good honorable mentions?
Well, first of all, I think we're all in agreement that Martin Short rules.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the 80s, he did.
I mean, as we can say that about, a lot of the, like Breeze was saying, there's so much talent in an era that's kind of overlooked in SNL lore. As far as other honorable mentions, Hans and Franz, look at you, little girly man. Church chat with the church lady. Dana Carvey. I watched a skit earlier today where Dana Carvey almost broke character and started laughing, and he caught himself. And he's like, "Wow, I almost had a mix up there. It must have been Satan trying to get up in there." And it was just as funny as what he was supposed to say. So.
Those were two examples of what I think of as 90s skits, but were actually in the 80s.
Yeah.
All right, Sags, Breeze. We got about 4 minutes left.
My only one was the Buckwheat when he got shot, and they kept cutting into every skit with a newscast, and they kept showing it in slow motion, and his eyes would be real big, and that was the main one. That and Grumpy Old Man. Oh, and I wish it was in 91. I looked it up. I really wanted it to be in like 89. Again, it's not the 80s, but Da Bears. That started in 91, 91, 92, I think. I was really hoping that was in the 80s, but like Bree said, it's a little later.
Yeah. And so we just missed out on some classic Chris Farley ones too. I think he started in 90, maybe 91. Maybe his first ever skit was the Chippendale tryouts with Patrick Swayze. That's hilarious, And of course, he just got more iconic.
Sure.
Some of his roles and skits.
Yeah.
So two I wanted to mention that you guys haven't mentioned yet. This is also one I thought started in the 90s, but actually started late 80s. Mike Myers' Sprockets. I love that one. It was really weird, but I just loved him, the way he was dressed and the way he would kind of prance around and walk around and say, now's the time on Sprockets when we dance.
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to mention Phil Hartman because he had so many good ones. You definitely got to give Phil Hartman some love. Cooking with the Anal Retentive Chef was another funny one.
Great.
Yep.
What about the Frozen Caveman Lawyer? Was that the late 80s or 90s? That was pretty good too.
And there were a lot of courtroom ones. Remember the People's Court where John Lovitz was playing the devil?
Yes.
And Phil Hartman was the judge, I think. And he says, Mr. Mephistopheles, you may rule the underworld, but I run this courtroom. And then John Lovitz getting interviewed by Doug Llewellyn as the devil, and he goes, You worship me. Worship me. What the heck, man?
Lovitz is the liar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great
Classic.
one. Forgot about that.
Another good skit, a recurring skit he had was he did this like mid-century English, like it was Tales of Ribaldry.
Yep.
And they would take
Yes,
these
yeah.
old stories and he would like get all like kind of sexual innuendo stuff.
Mhm.
And they'd always cut to him and he'd always have this look like,
Yeah.
"Ooh."
That was on my list. Yeah, that was good. Oh man. You could draft characters. I mean,
Oh,
or
absolutely.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure we probably will at some point.
yeah. Yeah. Because now it's just, I mean, I haven't watched Saturday Night Live in who knows how long, but I mean, you look back, there was some good stuff in the 90s, no doubt, with Chris Farley and that crew, Jimmy Fallon and Horatio Sands. I think the funniest one that I've seen, you mentioned Tom Hanks, and I just played this the other night too, was David S. Pumpkins. And I don't know why that's so funny to me, but it is. And he just weird.
I read an article about that, and Tom Hanks was not
minute.
real eager about doing that character, and it became iconic.
It's classic.
Yeah. Shout out to two females that came along later too. Had some great stuff. Tina Fey and Amy Poehler were both hilarious.
Kristen Wiig.
Kristen Wiig too, man. She's awesome. Yeah.
She's hilarious.
Yeah. Okay, we are wrapping it up for today. And Johnson, you got anything?
Oh, I forgot about that. Nah, it's not funny anymore. If I do it the third time.
No, it's still funny.
Yeah.
Who's next week?
Who ended up with Mr. Short-Term Memory?
Good question. I think it's me next week.
It is.
Yep.
And we have to decide if we're going to do our bonus Halloween episode.
Oh, yeah.